Hello. So I'm not sure if folks can see us. We can't see ourselves on there right now. Can you just give a little thumbs up if you can see us and hear us and everything appears to be working correctly? Oh,
I think you're good. We can see
okay,
you. We
we're
can hear
good.
you.
We can see you and hear us. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Now, please bear with me on this technology side. I still have a paper version in front of me as that's where I am. So I would like to start out by acknowledging that this meeting is taking place on Chief Dragi's territory, the traditional home of the Yellowknife Dene First Nations. And we're going to go forward today and talk about our yearly update of our annual report for land titles, our policies and procedures, a few legislative developments, one key piece of case law coming out of last year, fraud awareness piece coming out of BC, and then we'll go with questions. We do have 2 hours today. The presentation itself will not take the full 2 hours, so we definitely left time for questions, knowing that in the past we have had lots of interest and questions. We wanted to make sure that we left enough time for that. I'll also start out by saying, as I'm not sure if all of you know me, I'm Simone Tielesh. I'm the new registrar over at Land Titles. I've been there for about 6 months now. So I'm still definitely have lots to learn. It's a really detailed and complex office. So I'd like to invite Matt to jump in wherever needed, and especially if there might be a few little terminology things here and there. So please bear with me on that, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you in the future if I haven't had a chance to work with you yet. So, annual report. So thank you for moving the, okay, there we go. So annual report, the first key change is that we have changed our name. So the Land Titles Office still exists, but we have formally changed it to the Property Registries to include the fact that we also have the Personal Property Registries operating out of our office. And there has also been some changes to staff titles, which you may have seen if you've been emailing or around the office. So we have changed from the terms deputy registrar and document examiners and clerks to paralegal team lead, paralegals, and paralegal assistant to better reflect the duties and work being done. But we still, those are pretty new changes, so I think we're still often using terms, like document examiner and deputy registrar, and definitely understand when they're being used as well. We have our staffing as of today. You'll see a lot of new names. There's been big changes at our office in the past year, and even in the past 6 months since I have taken over as registrar. Matthew is now in the inspector role, as well as director of legal registries. I am now registrar. Our paralegal team lead and deputy registrar remains as Tracy, and our survey review officer remains the same with Maurice. And we have a new addition to our paralegal document examiner team, which is Lauren. So now we are fully staffed with 4 paralegals doing document review, which is great. We're going to get into how that will hopefully affect and improve turnover times for reviewing documents in a few slides. And we also have a new paralegal assistant, Emily, at the front desk, who you will have met if you have come into the office or called. So everyone is really great to work with so far. Everyone is coming along on their onboarding, and we're very happy to have a full office. If I'm talking too quickly or anything else, please just let me know. I'm not getting pop-ups with questions, but Matt, I'm going to leave the technology side to Matt so he can let me know. So, annual report. Here's land titles by the numbers. So as you can see here, the last column in bold is the previous fiscal. And numbers are a bit down. It has been a little bit slower this past fiscal than in previous years. We also have a bit of a better ability to record and count some of these numbers as NTLS has continued to get up and running and be used more by clients, the public, ourselves. So as you can see on the bottom here, we're now able to track these searches with a lot more clarity. So 2,276 packages processed the past fiscal. Registrations and titles issued are down slightly. Searches are definitely up, which is great. I think there's a lot more uptake of our online NTLS system as time goes on. And the submissions that are reviewed a day has remained constant at 16. Yeah, I think these changes and the numbers going down has definitely been affected by COVID and some of the different constraints that we've seen in the past year. It's been a very unusual year, as we will talk about further in the presentation. I also have a note here that our personal property registry searches have both increased by quite a bit, by about 1,000 searches a year for both registrations and searches in the last fiscal. I do want to remind people, since we have the NTLS title searches and the writ and GR searches here up on the screen, that our written GR searches on NTLS, if you are using that system, are not certified searches, which is what you have to request with our office. So that is both written on the search page and on a watermark when you actually pull up that search report. So NTLS does have a certain use, it's very convenient, but just a reminder that there is some risk there that those searches are not certified. All right, so who is doing what? Who is submitting things to our office? So I know it's hard to see the some of the small print here, so I can read anything out if you would like me to, but that is all the law offices. So we've limited this chart because this is a presentation to the bar, to mainly the law firms. So that pink section of the pie there that is labeled as other includes mostly registration firms such as Terranet, First Canadian Title, F&F Canada, and also various government departments, including the Housing Corporation, just so you get a sense of those submissions. Is there anything you'd like to add, or? All right, do we know what this is when it says more? Is that when we get notifications? Okay, no, that's good. Okay, sorry, just making sure we're good with the technology. So I thought this might be interesting for you folks watching. So we're doing this anonymously, of course, but we wanted to give a range of what we're seeing in terms of correctly submitted documents and submissions. So there's really a range, and I think what this is saying to me is that the more you practice in this area and the more you're doing this day to day, the more you get to know what is required and are submitting things generally with a higher correctness or accuracy rate. So if you would like to know where your firm is on these numbers, please email me and I will let you know. We have all sorts of data that our online system collects, and we can definitely help you out with that and let you know. If you also want to know if it's been improving or if there has been a slip since previous years, we can let you know that. Just for curiosity's sake, I also pulled up last year's numbers for the top 3 firms that are listed there, and they actually all have improved in their firm first-time submission rates as opposed to last year. So that's great. We're seeing improvement in all of those firms. Well, I won't obviously name all the firms. I think everyone would be okay if you're the #1 firm there to be named. So I do want to give a little shout out to Leanne. You have absolutely meticulous attention to detail and are unfailingly kind and friendly and polite. And it's that's 2 years in a row that, that your firm has been up at the top there. So again, email me if you'd like more information. So now looking at our timelines for the staff here at Land Titles, we've broken it out into quarters as it very much, each quarter is really different, and especially with COVID happening in the last year and staff changes are reflected in these numbers. So our goal for turnaround times is 2 days, as most of you will know, and this year has definitely been a little bit slower than previous years, which I'm sure most of you also know. This has mainly been because when we have been looking at these numbers due to staff shortages over the past year, which now we have done, 3 new positions that are filled within the our land titles office, so that will definitely be helping in the future. And also the effect of COVID within our daily operations. We have daily screening questions that are asked to all staff regarding their health and are very much aware not to come into the office if symptomatic at all, and are also observing the isolation requirements, whether for sickness, outside travel, or anything like that. So when we're not in the office, those staff are unable to help with moving the registry along, as we are unable to operate the registry remotely. So
just to build on what Simone was just saying, just as an example, on Monday, 20% of the office was in isolation, and that definitely has impacts on the ability to review and process.
Yeah, especially in such a small office as ours. So yeah, but we do have our email inquiries, which is available. Phone calls, we're trying to have more options for contacting us, and I think that's really had a lot of uptake, which is great as well this year. So, and with that, with the new staff, there's also been a lot of onboarding and training that has to occur to get those staff up and running, including myself, absolutely. So that, that works into our numbers for the past as well. Speaking of COVID, if you've been into our offices, you'll see that there are several new precautions in place to avoid the transmission of COVID-19 within our office. We ask that clients review symptoms. There's a poster on our door before entering, and to not enter the office if you are in any way symptomatic. Masks are encouraged upon entry, and we ask that only one client at a time be at each counter, and that's for the land titles counter and then also for the corporate counter. There are plexiglass shields that have been installed at both counters with a slot for passing documents through, and hand sanitizer that is available. We are also doing contact tracing for anyone who comes into the office, so we're taking names and numbers down for that purpose. Is there anything you'd like to add to that? Yeah, well, I think that's the next section, yeah. So as I said, the new plexiglass barriers have raised some interesting problems at our office as well, which we'll be talking about in a little bit here. So our policies and procedures. In terms of our communications and procedures, there has not been any major changes other than the ones that we've identified related to COVID-19 in the past year. And we would like to remind, I mean, everyone here is not quite the same, but as we don't give the public legal advice, and we do ask that if you have questions regarding your submission or even regarding a future submission, that you start off with talking to our paralegals, document examiners, or also our deputy registrar, as they are really just fountains of information. They are experts at what they do, and they're happy to talk with you. And especially if it's about an existing submission that is either in the queue or been reviewed, they'll have the most background in that matter. So usually Matt or myself would have to talk to them and bring them into a conversation anyway about a particular submission. So we definitely encourage that to be the first line of communication, and please, please call if you need to, or email. If there is a complex legal question or something you'd like to talk to me about, please feel free to call or email. I received several calls and emails since I've started in this position, and that has been great. I'm happy to speak with members of the bar. And let me just see if I have notes here that I haven't said. Oh yes, we please encourage, we have an email, a notification system that's through NTLS. So when you submit your packages, if you provide us with your firm's email address, you will get notifications when your package is accepted, if it's rejected, reasons are provided, and that will be pretty much instantaneously upon us clicking that button. So you'll really get knowledge of where things are in the queue there. And we definitely encourage everyone to use that service if you'd like to. Yes, so when you have your submission, if you provide those email addresses, just jump in if you need to.
I was going to say, we're not limited to just providing a single email address. You can provide multiple.
Yeah, and several firms do that as well. So this is, I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to this feature we have on NTLS. So especially after you provide that email address, and then we'll provide you with a package number. And this number can be used to check where your submission is at in the queue. So I know it's a little bit small, but the right-hand image there is our home screen to NTLS. And in the very bottom corner, there's the polar bear logo on one side, and in the other side, there's some data that could just look like, you know, kind of technical internet data. It is not. It is key information about where we are at within the registry. So I have zoomed in on that within the other box there. So packages in queue, first review and day booking completed, the date, which package, last accepted package, date, time, and package number. So using that number that you've received in your email, for example, you can then check where you are using that information. And we would also ask that you please allow around 24 hours from when you get that acceptance email to looking for the scanned document on NTLS, or, you know, coming in and picking up that document at the counter. After Tracy or myself signs the document, you know, accepts it on NTLS, say, then that package still has to go for sealing, processing, scanning, and being filed into our pickup locations and everything. So there are several jobs that have to happen after that accept button is pressed. So please, please be patient with that. And we do note that, and we've had a few people call in the past and ask, you know, where in the queue and when can I pick it up and things like that. So knowing these timelines, it does take time away from processing and checking the queue if we then have to go and check where the package is in the scanning pile and give updates, and it really slows everything down, especially when we're operating at a reduced capacity in the office. So just giving that little bit of extra time actually helps speed up and keep the queue moving efficiently. So please use this great feature. So this is a bit of an unfortunate slide to have to talk about, but I want to make a quick mention of it since I have this platform today. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to remind folks at the bar of our obligations under the Law Society Code of Conduct. And you know, everyone who I worked with at the bar has generally been absolutely professional and conscientious, and but just a reminder to please be patient and kind with all staff in the Land Titles Office, not only in our this year with the global pandemic and all the different stressors that are in place for people on a personal and professional level, new systems, new staff, But everyone is really working hard to provide the best service available and to provide it in a timely manner. We've had some incidents in the past year that have been, quite frankly, shocking and just not appropriate. So with our new plexiglass boards at the office, they have a slot to pass documents through, and we've had people reach their whole arm right up to their shoulder through the little slot in the plexiglass trying to get documents and wave their hand around. We've had people grabbing documents from our staff, and we've had emails regarding rejections that have been just almost aggressive and inappropriate in ways that that we just don't want to, see going forward. So just a reminder for everyone to please be kind, please be patient, and that everyone is working as hard as we can to keep the registry going. Thank you. So speaking of rejections, the top reasons for rejection are easy to avoid. So one of the great things about our new NTLS system is it gives us a lot of really neat statistical tracking that can happen when you're using an online computer system. So we're able to see how many rejections are for what reasons, and they're categorized. So when you get that rejection email, for example, it'll say not only a detailed reason from the examiner of why the rejection is taking place, but there's categories as well. So in the past fiscal, as an example, we've had 24 rejections that are to do with errors in executions of documents. In the past fiscal, we have had 85, which is definitely the lion's share, rejections to do with missing or correct information. And this one really is probably the easiest to avoid. This is things like missing documents, schedules, attachments, especially encumbrances. That happens quite often. Errors in the legal description, party names, and statutory wording being missing. So those are the key things I would look out for. And then we have another 2 boxes. One is for multiple reasons, and the other is for just other reasons that don't fall under these categories. So usually when it's multiple, those will include the missing or correct or incorrect information as well as additional reasons. And that was 96 in the past fiscal year. So please definitely take the time, read things through twice if you can, and it will avoid those rejections, get things moving through the system faster. Anything to add there? Okay. Notable legislative developments. What are we doing for time here? Okay, we're doing quite well. So not a whole ton has been going on this past year, but I will tell you about a few interesting things. Within the NWT, we have proposed to repeal and replace our Mechanics Lien Act with a Builders Lien Act. So you also may have already seen information on this. It was sent to all members of the bar. It was also posted on our website. Engagement has been completed now, and the summary of engagement has been emailed out to those who responded and who were asked to give input in the first instance, and it's also posted on our website if you'd like to take a look at it there. Also in BC, there is now, this is somewhat new in that the original legislation started around 2019, but the Landowner Transparency Registry is now up and running in British Columbia. So this is to, as it says there, to increase land ownership transparency in BC and combat money laundering to stop illegally acquired money from negatively affecting market prices and housing affordability. So the system, the goal is to ensure that beneficial ownership information, so this includes, for example, shareholders of corporations, beneficiaries of trusts, and partnership unit holders are identified, and it is the first of its kind in Canada. It is publicly accessible. There is a small search fee. Just to give you a little bit more information about what they're doing in BC right now and how it relates to the property bar. So there's what they have, transparency declarations, and there's transparency reports. This is all available online. And a transparency declaration is typically required in the residential type of situation where there is a residential home ownership and there is no ownership of a third party to the benefit of a third party. The transparency reports are more detailed filings, and they are required when there is beneficial ownership at play. These can be quite detailed and are required in a variety of circumstances. They're required when there is an update or change to the corporate information. They're required when the land is being dealt with in any way, as an example. So I just wanted to let you know that that was going on. And also that there is a fine that is possible under the Landowner Transparency Act of up to $50,000 if they fail to comply. So that's what's happening in BC. Usually every year we have a Canadian Council of Land Title Officials conference where we update each other on legislative initiatives, interesting case law in our home jurisdictions, and processes, all those types of things. That did not happen last year due to COVID, and this year we'll be moving to a virtual conference. So that'll be happening this summer. So I just wanted to let you all know that next year we should have even more information to share on these updates from across Canada. Is there anything else you'd like to add on that? I haven't actually participated in one of these yet, given that I've been in the position for 6 months, but Matt has for several years now and always, I think, gleans a lot of great information. Is there, just before I go on to the case law here, has there been any questions that you'd like to ask in regard to the operational side of our office, and before we go into more of the CPD legal side, or how would you like to proceed?
Simone, we're not seeing anything in the chat, so you may be good to go. And then as questions pop up, I'll just jump in and pass them on to you. Okay,
sounds good. It's like a voice coming from coming from the heavens when you talk here in this room. Okay. So, Primrose Drilling Ventures. This is a really interesting case coming out of Saskatchewan, and kind of, intrigue on the prairies. It deals with registrar error, indivisibility of title, certainty, registrar's caveats, and bona fide purchasers for value. But really, I think the case comes down to statutory interpretation. So this fact pattern is a little bit involved, but please bear with me. So in this case, the appellant, Primrose Drilling Ventures, I'm going to be reading a little bit here because it is quite detailed, so please excuse me looking down during the presentation. They appealed a decision of the Queen's Bench where the judge found that the respondent, Great West Life Assurance Co., was the owner of certain mineral rights. This case is unusual in that the decision was rendered as a result of questions referred by the Registrar of Land Titles to the Court of Queen's Bench pursuant to the Saskatchewan Land Titles Act. So I don't know if I see myself doing anything like that in the future, but I guess you never know. So the appeal was regarding an undivided quarter interest in minerals and has a lengthy history with the fact pattern starting in 1947. So in short, in 1947, Great West Life, we'll just call them, transferred surface title to a parcel, to a bona fide purchaser for value. We'll call them purchaser 2 because they're not as important in this. Reserving the title to the minerals. The master of titles at the time issued a certificate of title to purchaser number 2, in which they mistakenly included the minerals. So there was a mistake made at the land titles system. Purchaser for 2 transferred that title to the quarter interest, including all the minerals, in 1953 to the next bona fide purchaser for value. 20 years passed, then purchaser 3 sold to purchaser 4, another bona fide purchaser for value. And then it wasn't until 1973 that the registrar in Regina filed a caveat under their Land Titles Act, and this provided notice of the error. And they warned that any transfer of title was subject to that original owner, Great West Life's interest, and that registrar's caveat was never discharged up until when this proceeding went forward. So then move up to 1993. So like I said, this is a long history here. And that is when Primrose, this is purchaser 5 now, purchased the quarter interest in the minerals in question and acquired the title in 2006. So this was after the caveat had been registered. So after the title to the disputed interest was issued, Primrose then asked the registrar to remove the caveat. The registrar refused. The registrar then asked Primrose to surrender its title. Primrose refused. The registrar then filed this reference, asking 5 questions, including settling ownership of the disputed parcel. So we go to the next slide here. So the appeal was allowed. It was found that Primrose was the owner of the disputed interest and the caveat was discharged by the courts. So this case was a question of law pursuant to the Saskatchewan Land Titles Act, and the standard of review was correctness. As I mentioned previously, this really came back and hinged on 2 things. One was the concept of the Torrens system and indivisibility of title certainty, and the other was on statutory interpretation of the Land Titles Act as it existed in 1965, which was the same wording that existed when this land was first dealt with and the error was made, and then also the more recent 2000 version. So I'll briefly go over all 5 of the questions, but focusing on the key piece going forward. So the first question is, does an acquirer of mineral rights take the title subject to the notice provided in a duly registered pre-existing registrar's caveat that was registered under that formal 1965 Land Titles Act? The court decided that yes, but in this case, the caveat that was filed was not duly registered, which we will come to in a little bit. The second question was, does the acquirer of a surface title take that subject to the notice provided in a duly registered pre-existing registrar's caveat that was registered under that formal Land Titles Act? Again, yes, but in this case, it was not duly registered. Matt, do you want to jump in, and the legislation is similar, we're saying?
Yeah, sorry, I got really terrible handwriting. I was about to say, I was going to add that the Saskatchewan Land Titles Act in respect to registrar's caveats is substantially similar to the legislation in the Northwest Territories, and similar processes and registrar's references to the court. So.
Yeah, so then why was this caveat not considered to be duly registered? So the court found that the relevant provisions of the 1965 Act and the 2000 Land Titles Act concerning the principle of indefeasibility of title remained the same between the two, and that the purpose of a registrar's caveat is to provide notice of a claim that could, if substantiated, affect the title or registered interest affected by that caveat in accordance with the purposes of indivisibility, and the original owner's claim was not a claim that could be affected after the bona fide purchaser value of purchaser number 2. So in short, there was no effect that was possible from the registrar's caveats, which should not have been registered, in short. Question number 3 was, if the answer to question number 1 is affirmed, does the Registrar of Titles have authority under the Land Titles Act to correct the error or omission related to a mineral title issued after the registration of the registrar's caveat, provided notice of that error or omission without consent of the new title owner? And no, the registrar does not have that authority if the new title owner is a bona fide purchaser for value. So I think this point, if you look at the commentary surrounding this case online, it was definitely, I think, celebrated in most spheres of private practice to ensure, certainty within the land title system. So moving on to question number 4 was, if the answer to question number 2 is affirmed, does the Registrar of Titles have the authority under the Land Titles Act to correct the error or omission relating to the surface title issued after the registration of the registrar's caveat, provided that notice of the error or omission without the consent of the new title owner? So again, no, the registrar does not have that authority if the new title owner is a bona fide purchaser for value. So the court combined those 2 questions and used the statutory interpretation of the Land Titles Act to come to that understanding. So as purchaser number 2, whose name happened to be Unical, was entitled to rely on the register when it acquired the interest, so too was Primrose when it acquired the title to that fee simple interest. And on the current facts, this is question number 5, what is the court's determination pursuant to the Land Titles Act respecting proper ownership of the quarter interest in minerals to the parcel? And that was Primrose was the proper owner of the quarter interest to the minerals. So I think one of the interesting effects or outcomes of this case relates back to the assurance fund and who should be claiming against the assurance fund and when, an error did occur here. And, this would go all the way back to, I think it was 1947, I said, to the original error that was made, and to Great West Life's ability to claim in that instance. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about this case?
Simone, before you go on, let me jump in because we got a question that goes back to registration, and I didn't get it to you quickly enough. So one of the questions is that you mentioned that when a package is submitted, it's assigned a number, and then when one checks the status of the queue info on the bottom of the main page, it shows the most recently registered package by number so that you get a sense of where your package sits. One of the viewers gets the email notifications when their package is day booked and registered, but they don't get an email when it's submitted telling me what the package number is. And they're wondering, is this because they perhaps forgot to tick a box? Is there something they can do to correct that?
Do you have? No. I'll let Matt answer that one. He's more of he was there when NTLS was developed, so.
Yeah, so the automatic notifications are designed to be sent only when the submission has been passed first review and been assigned a daybook number, which later becomes a registration number. When it is accepted and final review by either the registrar or the deputy registrar, or when the submission is deemed unacceptable for registration and is being returned back to the submitter. So no, there is no error in not receiving the email notification upon submission. At the time, there was a discussion about if that would occur, but the determination was that it was likely going to be leading to an ever-increasing volume of emails for the same submissions and packages and flooding people's inboxes. So it only appeared once the first review was done, and if we were in our normal timelines in processing, it should be the same date or the next date. So we found that it wasn't appropriate for that. So no, it's not intended to go that way.
All right, thanks for that.
Any other questions before we continue? There's only one piece left on fraud awareness, so you should start thinking about your questions now. Okay, we can continue. Okay. So you may have seen this recently in the news. Fraudster gets away with transferring title for BC home using forged passport. And a quote here directly to legal professionals. Legal professionals hired by the fraudster accepted a scanned copy of the false passport and assisted the fraudster in transferring the title to the property. So just to give a little background of how this fraud occurred, so that we're always being diligent and keeping our eyes open for fraud. The fraudster posed as the homeowner who lived abroad and was renting this home out. They then tricked the property manager into sending documents to them that allowed them to further impersonate the homeowners for realtors and the lawyers involved. The fraudsters forged passport, and they used this with both the realtors and the lawyers, accepting scanned copies of the passport, and they also somehow bypassed all of the other requirements to verify identity to both of those groups. And the fraud actually went ahead in this case. So some key signs that are listed here that we should all be aware of for fraud is if there is requested urgency surrounding the dealings with the land. If the person is living away, especially abroad. If there's any really unusual instructions that go along with the conveyance, for example, listing below value, not using MLS, or not wanting to put for sale signs outside the house. And the suggestion here was to avoid this type of incident in the future was, especially if you're not able to be there in person to verify identification, is to use professional third party in the place where that person is abroad or wherever to verify their identity before moving forward. So if anyone else has any stories, interesting tidbits to share on being vigilant against potential fraud, I'm sure we'd be interested to hear them. But I believe that is, oh, I just wanted to also ask everyone if you could, we'll go to the last slide for questions from the bar, but this is the first time we've held this presentation in April. Usually it's held in the beginning of the year, and part of the reason for this change was me having to, learn the job a little bit more, but partially it was also that we had a full fiscal year's of data to bring to you for this presentation. So if you think it's helpful to have this occurring now, as opposed to occurring early in the year, or if you have a preference, either way, please email me, or next time you stop in the office, let us know, and we can take that into account for next year. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we go
Just
for
hope next
questions?
year we can have everyone in the same room.
That would be lovely. Yeah. So it looks like we might have an hour presentation instead of a 2-hour, but we'll go to questions. I've been assured by Matt that usually there is lots of interest in what's going on and questions for moving forward. So if there's any questions from the bar.
Well, those millions of questions get written down. Your case in BC is a good cautionary tale about the necessity of doing client verification, which we're all required to do now under the rules to make sure that we don't get trapped in the kind of fraud situations that you've identified. And there is, we've spent some time talking about a robust way of verifying identity when you can't meet face-to-face with the client. And this is a good reminder of why that's important.
Yeah, and even during, I mean, COVID times and people working remotely, never mind being abroad, right? This is definitely coming to the forefront more and more.
Okay, folks, so this is your chance to ask questions. I'm not seeing anything pop up in the chat box. So Simone and Matt will talk mindlessly about things for 2 or 3 minutes while we wait for them to pop up.
Do we have anything to, do we have anything else that you'd like to tell the bar about? We have new carpets. That's a great topic of mindless conversation. If you come into our office, we have snazzy new kind of dark gray and blue carpets that have taken over from the beige ones that were 30 years old. 21 years old. So it's looking really sharp in there right now. So come check us out, say hi, wear your mask.
We have not a question, but a comment that says, is the possibility of online registrations on the horizon? If not, please keep it that way. Do either of you want to comment on that?
Well, I think they're in luck. I'll let Matt answer that one.
Right now, the department is back a little bit. The most recent development in our electronic systems was NTLS, which got completed a year and a half ago. Since that time, we've developed a capital submission in order to now upgrade our corporate registry system. The current project to upgrade the corporate system is started. Started at the beginning of April, and it is anticipated to last next 2 to 3 years. Through that process of updating the corporate registry system, we are contemplating some electronic submissions of corporate documents. Once the corporate registry system is developed, tested, implemented, and such, we will then go and look at shifting gears again back towards the NTLS and real property registry system. And we will see how it's working for the corporate system and see if we can implement those things as appropriate for the lines.
Thanks for that. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. So that being the case, I'm going to suggest that you've answered everyone's question and there is no other.
Great job. Everyone is thrilled, and we'll just continuing on.
I don't know. I have this expectation that people will be calling you wanting to find out if they're firm 1 or firm 8 in your staff.
Well, I'm happy to chat.
You best get back to the office. There is something else that's popped up. And this may not be something you can answer, but the question is, with shutdowns and client meeting restrictions in other jurisdictions, is there any thought to permitting remote execution of documents?
Great question. Not at this time, but when thinking about this, we have alternative means have been working across the NWT to date, which I think have been being used in more of the remote areas across the north, RCMP, et cetera. But there are some concerns over capacity, the concept of duress, and of client identification. I'll give an example that was in the news in March, actually. So, I mean, this isn't specifically for remote executions, but just as an example of some of the concerns around these, using Zoom and different remote technologies. In March of this year, there was a Zoom hearing for a man. I wrote this down because I thought we might talk about this. A Zoom hearing for a man that was accused of assault, and it was adjourned after it was found that he was actually attending the Zoom hearing from the home of the woman who was testifying against him. He was, in the other room. And the only reason that it was found out was the prosecutor was very sharp and had a great attention to detail to see that the witness kept looking when she was speaking to that other room and seemed a bit worried. So she notified the court and the police, and they came to the residence, and that was a potentially really terrible situation. So not that that's directly related. I'm just saying I think we're all still learning with these new technologies that are available to us. And also this type of change wouldn't just affect land titles, it would probably affect all of the Department of Justice, which is a really big undertaking. But we are monitoring and learning and seeing what other jurisdictions are doing. So we definitely have our eyes open for this one. Is there anything?
All right, thanks for that. There are still no questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thank both Simone and Matthew for their presentation. A reminder that we do have Simone's PowerPoint, and we will be putting that up with the recording of this session when we put it up on the Law Society YouTube channel. If any of you want your own copy of it, if you could let me know or let Bob Wilson know, and we'll make sure we get a copy sent to you. Otherwise, thank you everybody for participating. Thank you, Simone. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you for having us.